So we're ready to restart. So recall that we have been discussing what consensus is, and we are now focusing on the purely permissionless setting, where we don't have any authentication, and we're in particular talking about Nakamoto's consensus protocol, and in particular to what extent it's secure. So I ended up showing you the following theorem that says actually that if the attacker is controlling less than 50% of the computational power that is spent in a protocol, then the protocol is secure as long as the difficulty parameter in the protocol is correctly set. So let rho be the fraction of the computational power spent in the protocol that is controlled by the attacker. So we're assuming it's less than 1/2. If we now set the difficulty correctly, where correctly means that blocks are found on average slower than delta, where delta is the maximum network latency. In that case, we have consistency, liveness, and some chain quality that's going to be more than 0. And in fact, it's worth pointing out that in the previous proof that we discussed here, it's enough to just have, like, let's say 1% chain quality. That's enough to get liveness, right? Because by chain growth, the chain is growing. As long as 1% of the blocks are honest, your transactions of honest guys will be included by some honest guy. Okay. So this Nakamoto's protocol does not satisfy optimal chain quality. What we said here was that if the attacker controls less than 1/3, the only thing we know is that the attacker will get less than 1/2 of the blocks. But at least to get consistency in liveness, that's good enough. Maybe it doesn't give you the right incentives, but if we're just in a standard computational computer science model where we assume that 50% of the resources are spent by good guys, we're fine and we get consistency of liveness. All right, so now I'm going to spend some more time discussing a little bit what does it mean blocks are found slower than delta for the security. And I'll then try to give a high-level overview of this proof. I won't go into the detail. The proof is actually quite complicated, but at least convey the intuition for why this works. So we want the block then to be more than delta. Okay, so here's a graph that tells you how to set the block time as a function of delta. Okay. So here I'm plotting C is what the block time is in terms of delta. Okay. So if I set C to be 1, the block time is delta. When I set C to be 60, that means that the block time is 60 times delta. In practice, we said people have estimated that a good upper bound on network delivery is 10 seconds. Okay. So when I look at C equals 60, that means I have a block time of 10 minutes. Right? So today, in practice, if we believe this 10 seconds, we are considering Nakamoto is parameterized by C equals 60. Are you with me? 10 seconds, 10-minute block time on Nakamoto, that's how we set it. That means C equals 60. At that point, if you put it C equals 60, then you're going to actually get resilience against 49.57. So as long as the attacker is controlling less than 49.57 of the computational power, we're secure. And you see here on the graph that as long as when you take down C, security is actually going to go down. So the security is the blue line is how secure it is. And then we also have an attack. This is actually the same attack as Decker and Wattenhofer. So attack. And they're pretty close. At least they're tight here. Here it's not tight. So when C is small, it's not tight. But we probably don't want to be here because in this regime, it anyway seems to deteriorate. And the curious thing here is that if you look at this graph, like, where would you want to put yourself, right? Like, if you want to get close to 50%, you want to be somewhere around here, right? But there really isn't any advantage to going further. So it's kind of curious how Nakamoto came up with this, like, 10 minutes. Because, like, that seems to be, like, look at this graph as the sweet spot to be. Unless he already had a proof like this on his own and just didn't publish it. Who knows? Okay, so that is in terms of a graph, yeah?
People refer to an attack. What is the economical attack that people refer to?
Economical attack, or this is not an economical, this is a consistency attack. This is an attack if you control more than 49.8, then you can actually do this forking.
But it's a very specific attack strategy that's meant.
Yes. So that attack strategy actually requires you to control the network. Okay. So it is a particular attack that's in the paper. Yeah. Okay. So a little bit more detailed. What we actually show is that security holds when this equation holds. Okay. So let me explain what this equation is, because it's kind of clean, and it at least explains the components here. Alpha, here is the mining rate of honest players. So by mining rate, I mean roughly how long does it take for an honest guy to, let's say in each second, what's the probability that an honest guy finds a block? Okay, that's how fast honest guys find blocks. Beta is the mining rate of the adversary. Okay, what's the probability that a bad guy managed to mine a block? So 50% computational power for the attacker, that means that alpha is greater than beta. Right? That's like the plain, simplest condition. If the attacker controls less than 50%, then we have that alpha is greater than beta. Are you with me? So that would be the ideal condition. Right? We would like to say the protocol is secure as long as alpha is greater than beta. That's not going to be the case. We have to say that alpha multiplied by something is greater than beta. And this is something that's smaller than 1. So what is this expression? This expression is something that's a function of the network delay. Okay? Network delay multiplied by alpha. Okay? So if I didn't have this alpha here, it would deteriorate a lot with network delay. But this delta gets multiplied by alpha. So if the mining rate is very small, right, if the probability of you finding a block in every time step is very small, in that case, this alpha is going to essentially kill off the delta, and you can make it as small as you want. Okay? And that's why, in order for you to get close to alpha is greater than beta, right, 50%, you need to make sure that alpha is very small, because then it will kill off the delta.
What is the units of the network delay?
Any unit you want, as long as this is the same unit as that, right? Seconds. Does it make sense? So this tells you why you need to set alpha, the mining rate, to be very small, and therefore you just set the difficulty. The difficulty determines the mining rate, right? If the difficulty is big, then mining rate goes down. So if you want to kill off delta, you need to make sure that the difficulty is set so that the mining rate, in essence, you should not be able to find blocks more often than delta to kill off delta. All right, so here's the intuition for why this formula on a high level should be true. Okay? So the way the attack works actually explains very well kind of why something like this needs to be the case. This is what attackers should do. Whenever the honest nodes mine a block, the attacker will take that block and he's not going to deliver it to the rest of the network. He's going to delay it by delta, because he can. Right? We're assuming an attacker is controlling the network, and he can delay things by delta. What that means is that every time a block is found, the attacker now has delta time that he's mining on the right block, but the good guys are mining on the wrong block. Okay? So really think of it as, if an attacker wants to mine his own chain to break consistency, every time the good guys find a block, he gets a gain of delta time. Okay? And that is indeed why, if you set the block time to be C times delta, his advantage is roughly only going to be 1 over C, right? Because each time this happens, the good guys lose a delta, but that's very small compared to the whole thing. It's only 1 over C of the actual time. Yeah?
Do we assume each node has a negligible portion of the total quantum computation?
No. This is like, we don't, no. So this is not a continuous model, right? This assumes that the attacker can be controlling a certain number of things and is using a hash function in parallel and so on.
No, so I mean, that
This is not an analysis, this is an intuition, okay? This is a very high-level intuition for why this should be right. Just to sort of, if you forget why the formal analysis works, which you probably will after I'll show you a few slides, but after that, but at least this one you will remember. You will understand why it is the case that the the difficulty needs to be parameterized by delta. Because the attack is such that if the attacker controls the network, he can actually get some extra computational, he has some time to compute when the good guys are computing on the wrong path. They're computing on something all that's wasteful. And that is that network latency that he has. So that's why you need to set the network, the difficulty be such that that gain he has is small as a function of the block time. All right, let's spend 5 minutes to actually explain the ingredients that go into the proof. Okay. So here is the high-level overview. The first thing is, it's a mess to analyze things having this hash function, the random oracle there. So the first thing we're going to do is to define something we cryptographers call an ideal functionality. So we're going to try to define an ideal functionality we call the F-MINE functionality that in essence abstracts away what happens with the random oracle model, and you can just think of this as attacker having or good guys and attacker having a probability of extending a tree. Okay, so we have functionality that tells us you can go to the functionality and extend the tree, the chain, and with some probability, depending on your computational effort, you can extend the tree. Okay. The second thing we're going to do is to define some good pattern. Okay? And that is the key thing. And that's something we're going to call a convergence opportunity. The important thing here is it's very hard to reason about what a bad guy is doing. Remember, in Nakamoto's original analysis, he said that the attacker is going to try to mine a longer chain on the side. That's the attack he's considering. I would like to have an analysis that does not make any assumption on what the attacker does. So it's very hard for me to analyze what it means to make progress when I don't know what the attacker does. So I'm going to focus on identifying a pattern of behavior for the good guys, such that when that thing happens, I will make sure things converge. Okay, so that's going to be a converged opportunity. And this, note, it's only defined over the good guys. So what is a converged opportunity? A converged opportunity is a period where we have delta time silence, whereby silence means that no good guys find a block. No good guys are successful in this mining. Okay? Then a single good guy finds a block, and then we again have a period of delta silence. No other good guys find a block. Make sense? Only defined over the good guys now. Okay? A single, silence, single guy, silence. Then we're going to show, number one, that convergence opportunities grow fast. Okay? And that will directly imply that the chain will grow and will also give consistency. And then chain quality is going to follow as an easy consequence. I won't go into chain quality here. All right, so let's go over why converged opportunities imply chain growth. That's actually very easy. I would like to argue that every time I have a converged opportunity, the good guys' chains need to grow. Anyone can see why? Okay, so let me do it. So we have a silence of delta. What that means is that if some guy has found a chain, the longest chain held by a good guy at this point will get propagated to all the good guys. Because whenever some guy has found a new chain, he sends it out to everybody. And since nothing happens over delta, I know that that chain must have been propagated to everybody because delta is an upper bound on network delay. So after first silence, I know that all the good guys have chains that are as long.
Sorry, why does it not correct delta?
Sorry? Why delta? And
Not correct delta some function you
confirm? No, this is now it's actual network delivery. Delta is network delivery. Okay. So after this delta, everybody has gotten this chain. Then a single guy mines something. So now he extends the chain by 1. Okay, so therefore, after delta time, that chain, the new block has been propagated to everybody else. So now their chains have grown. And in this protocol, remember, we always go to a longer chain. We never go to a shorter chain. So by this, I know that the chain has grown for everybody. So chain growth is very easy. Okay, the harder thing is showing consistency. Okay, and here I'm only giving you a very, very high level idea of why consistency follows from converged opportunity. So the key idea is the following. Whenever I have a converged opportunity for a certain length, unless a bad guy is able to mine a block exactly for that length, I claim that good guys will never actually, that block is going to be confirmed, right? Because if a bad guy does not find something else there, since there's a single good guy that mined something, that's the only thing that can be placed in that position, right? Now, in order for a bad guy to actually mine something at exactly that position, actually, in order for a bad guy to actually replace something at that position, he needs to not only mine something at that position, but he needs to mine it also pretty close to the time when the good guys had the converged opportunity. Because if he does it later on, then the good guy's chance will be so long, so they will actually never be willing to replace it. So in essence, as long as I can argue that the number of converged opportunities is much bigger than the number of blocks that the bad guy can do, mine, then I'm fine. Because in that case, I know there must be some converged opportunity, and when there is a converged opportunity, I know that that block is going to be fixed, and the same for everybody else. So, yeah?
I don't follow why we're using convergence opportunity. In reality, many honest people are proposing blocks simultaneously, right?
Yeah, no, that's a problem, right? That's the whole point, that the only way we converge is when we have that converged opportunity. Even if there's no attack, there could be even good guys or if we get conflict. And that's why we need to have that silence so that the good guys agree on what the longest chain is. A single guy is doing something, and then there's again this silence so that all the good guys will get that, right? That's exactly the point. We need a convergent opportunity for all of us to make sure that that single thing we had here is received by everybody. And once there is, that will never be revisited unless a bad guy finds something there.
Okay, so maybe what I'm asking, how does this case generalize to the Bitcoin case where you don't have convergence?
No. So I'm going to argue, but now I've argued high level. I'm cheating, right? But I've argued that if we have more converged opportunities than the number of blocks that the bad guy can do, we will converge. So now I just need to argue that we have many converged opportunities in Bitcoin. Now the key thing here is I don't have to talk about bad guys at all. This is now a pattern only about good guys. I'm only analyzing the good guys mining process. So why do I have many converged opportunities? I like to analyze how fast converged opportunities grow. Okay? Now, the answer to that, what I should say is like, look, this is easy. This is just a Markov chain. So just like set up the whole thing, do a concentration from Markov chains, and you can know how many converged opportunities you're going to get in an interval. Okay? And that is the right answer. Unfortunately, at the time, I'm still not very good at Markov chains. I wasn't then, and I'm not now. So that's not how I did it. So instead, what we did was we came up with a more clever kind of way of like directly analyzing this process, okay? And it's actually very easy, and it will explain to you why in this formula here, there was something bizarre that happened. There was a factor 2 here, okay? So let me explain where that comes from. Okay, so the analysis is, so if I would like to see how many converged opportunities I have in an interval, the first thing we can easily argue is we can easily bound how many successful minings the good guys do. right? We know the rate of mining, so therefore by the Chernoff bound, I know that I'm going to be very close to that with high probability, right? So I have a bound on how many blocks the good guys mine. Everyone's with me? If I know what the expectation is, I can use the Chernoff bound because it's independent random variables here. Okay, so that's easy. But that's not enough. I would like to find out how often do I have silence, single guy silence, right? Next thing we do is like, let's look at the distance between successful mines. Okay? On average, they're going to be longer than delta, right? Because that's how we set it. So again, we can now use the Chernoff bound to look at how many long distances we're going to have. And they're going to be very few. Okay? And so now, the point here is that every time I have a a short distance, I want to look at how often can I have short distances between these things. That's going to be very small because on average is delta. It's much more than delta, right? On average, I find things with the distance is much bigger than delta. So therefore, the probability that it's small is very small by the Chernoff bound. Now, every time I have a distance that's small, that can ruin 2 of the blocks that were mined. So every time a bad distance kills off 2 of these mining opportunities. And that's, in essence, where this factor 2 comes from. Okay? So this proof is actually very easy. It's, in essence, what I just told you here. It can be just written down. The other one is more complicated to do, formalize. But this is really quite easy. Now, today, we have much better bounds. Indeed, by doing the right thing, and to point out that this is a Markov chain, and if you're good at analyzing Markov chains, you can get a better bound. Okay, and so at least if you don't care about getting a nice formula. If you do this thing, you don't get a very nice formula, closed form expression, but you can actually compute numerically much better bounds by directly analyzing the Markov chain. It still, I think, is a great question, I think, to, like the right answer, I think, should be this formula without the factor 2. And I think something very close to that has actually been shown by this very nice paper by Ren a few years ago in a more idealized model. Like if you want to be in the most general model where you just have a random oracle, I still don't think it's known how to get a closed form expression that is tight. But indeed, if you just care about getting the exact right bound, you can do it better by analyzing the Markov chain and numerically estimating what the probability is. Okay, so to conclude, what we've shown here now is that Nakamoto's protocol is secure if I set the mining difficulty correctly. And it's really super, super important to point out here, this is a synchronous protocol, right? The mining difficulty needs to be set appropriately as a function of network delay. It's a bizarre synchronous protocol, right? Because synchronous protocols usually have a clock and a timer, and I time things out, and I measure, and I usually make sure that everything takes delta. I don't do it there, right? Because the protocol does not have any clocks. But does it? Sorry? It doesn't have a clock, but really implicitly it does. So because of the hashing, I'm actually not measuring time, but I'm using hashes to measure time.
It's quite explicit, right? You set it as a function of the time.
I set it as a function of the time, yeah.
And the computation of the power.
Exactly, yes. So it needs to be, but it's really, at first people looked at this protocol and said, this is a partially synchronous protocol. There's no clocks here involved at all. But really there is, because it's only secure under the right parameterization. Okay, then in this paper we kind of formalized this attack by Decker and Waterhofer, showing the results of blatant attack if you are in a partially synchronous network. And so there is always some network delay that kills it. Okay, that shouldn't be a surprise. That's kind of what the intuition I mentioned before. And then you might ask, okay, Nakamoto can be broken with some bigger network delays. Is this inherent? Maybe there's some other protocol that is going to be secure in the partially synchronous model. Turns out that actually, no, it's not. You cannot get a protocol in the partial synchronous model if the players even just only know a 2 approximation to the number of nodes in the network. So remember, Nakamoto, the key thing here is anybody can join, players don't know how many other players are out there. In fact, what you can show is that it's enough that you don't know a 2 approximation. Right? You don't know if the number of players is 100 or 200. If that's what you don't know, then you cannot get something that's partially synchronously secure. Okay? So let's see it. Okay, because these lower bounds are, you can, they're all the same. Well, they're not the same. There's a few different styles. This one is going to recall one of the old styles we've seen. Yeah?
I guess I'm a little confused by the model here, because if you allow simple attacks, then you never know to approximation by definition. So are you not allowing them, or are you I'm a little confused.
So, so this lower bound is, so Nakamoto, indeed, that's the whole point, right? Nakamoto handles everything. So if Nakamoto should be secure in a setting like this, and even much more, right?
But if you're saying it's not, I understand, but
No. Nakamoto is just synchronous. This is partially synchronous.
Yeah. But I guess I mean, the part in blue is never true in the model that I think you're working in, right?
It's never true, yes, exactly. So now I want to say that, in fact, you cannot, Nakamoto is the best it does, right? You cannot hope to improve on Nakamoto, because even if you just make a very weak assumption like this, it already becomes impossible. So in some sense, it's really up to. Okay, so let's see this thing. It's very easy, and in essence, we've seen this before. Okay, so it's a variant of this alternate universe thing. Okay, so we have here, it's a mix of the alternate universe and the partial synchronous. So it's kind of somewhat cute. On the left here, we have n players. On the right here, we have n players. In total, we have 2 n players. Okay? And now we're in a partially synchronous setting. Okay, remember partially synchronous meant that there is some function confirm, and I should finalize the execution within confirm of the actual network latency. Okay? Here, these guys are talking very fast to one another within 1 second. These guys are talking within 1 second also. But all communication between these things take a long time. Okay? The protocol does not know whether we have n players or 2 n players. Okay? So, as far as the protocol goes, we could be in a world where this is all that exists, left side. Right? If that's all that exists, this is now a protocol with n players where everybody's talking fast within 1 second. So we need to produce an output within confirm of 1 second. Let's say 10 seconds. Right? Same thing here. Okay? If, again, we feed in a transaction that's high entropy here and a different one with high entropy there, with very high probability, this guy needs to output TX1 but not TX2, and the same thing there. Okay? And then eventually, so now we've broken consistency because these guys are outputting something else in here. So you with me? So in fact, just adding some uncertainty about a number of players is enough actually to show that you cannot hope to get a partially synchronous protocol. So in that sense, Nakamoto inherent, like we cannot do better. We need to do something like Nakamoto that's parameterized by the network delay. If we would like to do something that's fully permissionless, yeah, in this not knowing number of players. All right, so let's conclude here and see what we've seen. So we kind of said that the most adversarial permissionless model would be, we don't know how many players there are, okay? We don't know the exact number of players because there can be Sybil attacks and other things. The last lower bound we show here was that means that we need to be in a synchronous model. Okay, partial synchronously, bye-bye. if we want a protocol that doesn't know how many players are out there. Nodes can come and go. I haven't shown you this, but I will show you it very shortly. This is actually a proof that we've essentially seen. That is actually going to imply that we need 1/2 honesty. Okay? And no authentication means we need proof of work. That we've already seen. Okay, we show that the impossibility result, if we don't have authentication, that it's impossible to do anything. So the only thing I haven't shown you is this, 1/2 honesty, and that is now the same one as before, the alternative universe thing. I'm not going to go over it, but it's really, if the attacker controls more than an honest majority, you consider one execution on the left, which is the honest, one execution on the right, where the attacker is doing exactly what the honest guys were doing, and a late joiner cannot tell if it should output this or this, because they look exactly the same. Okay, so the same argument as we saw before works even without any partial synchrony or anything like that, if the attacker controls more than 50%. This is really kind of trivial, right? It's saying like, I cannot hope to have consistency if I have more than 60% dishonesty, because the dishonest guys can always vote for, make it look like they were good guys. Okay, so the conclusion here is, if this is what my model requires, I don't want non-players, I want to allow nodes coming and going, late joining, and no authentication. I need to be in a synchronous model, I need to assume honest majority, and I need proof of work. Yeah.
How do you define proof of work?
I need, this one is actually, it's not that I don't need proof of work. I cannot do it in the standard model, right? So, like what we showed here was that the attacker needs to kind of simulate, to get around this impossibility result, the attacker needs to simulate the good guys, so he needs to do as much work as the good guys to break it. But I will come back to that.
Sorry, may I have a question?
Mm-hmm.
When you wrote that the nodes don't know exact number of nodes.
Yeah.
So does it imply that if a number of nodes is in a range, for example, if it's 10 or 11?
No, we didn't show actually, right? And that's not true. Actually, because you can get security in that setting by just deteriorating the threshold from 1/2 to 40% or something like that. All right? You can always view the people that don't show up as being malicious, and that's always the case. So that's why you need to if the uncertainty is a factor 2, then we have an impossibility. I'm not sure we have bounds that are completely tight there, but yeah.
Can you have a protocol that you assume the network delay locally instead of globally? Meaning that any point in time you can adjust the network delay according to reality and still achieve consistency and liveness?
I don't know, because if you don't know what the network delay is, you run into these problems. Let's maybe talk about that afterwards. All right, so Nakamoto seems to be pretty amazing. It is kind of hitting all the lower bounds, at least under those desiderata. Okay? So it does honest majority of computational power, allows people to come and going, and I don't need to know how many people are around. But there's a bunch of horribilities with this protocol also, right? It's theoretically amazing here, but there's a bunch of issues. Number one, as we've seen, in order to get consistency, the block time needs to be pretty big. It needs to be much more than delta, and in fact, at least 10 times delta to get something pretty reasonable. So it's not great. And that's why in practice, the block time Nakamoto is set to 10 minutes. So it's not very, very fast to confirm transactions. There's also a throughput issue. Blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain has 10 transactions per second. And so, and importantly, this proof of work thing just seems horrible, right? That we need to waste all this computational effort. Should the world just be in this whole competition of who can compute more wasteful things? That's really pretty And then the thing that we have already discussed a little bit, it's actually not incentive compatible because there's chain quality issue. As I mentioned, I don't have time, but if you're interested, there are more slides towards the end. And I can also tell people a little bit more about this in the break afterwards. So that's not going to be my focus, but it is an issue. It can be dealt with to some extent. So we have this alternative protocol on top of Nakamoto that can achieve almost optimal chain quality. It can get like 1 minus epsilons close to the optimal. The only problem is this epsilon is not negligible like we want in cryptography. It's a 1 over a polynomial, and then the epsilon shows up in the liveness. If you want to get very close to optimal chain quality, you need to actually wait long to confirm things. So it's still an open problem, and I think it's a great open problem to get a blockchain protocol that has optimal chain quality. In other words, that it's actually incentive compatible, as opposed to epsilon incentive compatible, which is a notion that game theorists don't really like, because if I can gain by an epsilon, it's still an epsilon. Why would I leave money on the table, right? So can we get something that's actually incentive compatible? Yeah.
The definition of chain quality, again, that you mentioned before is that the rewards are proportional to the amount of hash power that the players put in.
Yeah, not the rewards, but the number of blocks that you get is proportional to that, yeah. Not proportional, it's like the same, right? Yeah. All right, so I'm going to now focus on removing proof of work, and in particular, proof of stake. So do we need to waste energy? Answer number 1, you don't want to waste energy, go back to the 80s, okay? Go back to the permission setting. It's great, okay? We can get very fast protocols, high throughput, everything is good. But it's a little bit of a non-starter for us here because the talk was called permissionless consensus, so we're not going to do this, okay? So instead, we're going to look at this setting of proof of stake. Okay, and so you've already heard quite a bit about this in Valeria's great talk, and so I'm going to kind of go over the setup very fast and then move on to the actual approaches to achieve this. So the idea here is that instead of voting based on computational power, because really the right way to think about Nakamoto is that we're doing some voting in order to agree on this set of transactions, and I'm getting more votes if I have more computational power. Every time I'm wasting, like I said, every time I kill a tree, I get 1 vote that I can cast. Okay? And here we're saying, look, let's not cut down trees. Let's not do computational, expensive computations. But rather say, every person who has a Bitcoin gets 1 vote. Okay? Every coin you have gives you one vote. And then can we just do the same thing based on that? So that's the idea, yeah?
That's not anyone. It's anyone that has 1 Bitcoin to participate.
Sorry, everybody?
It's not everyone can join. Only those that have 1 Bitcoin.
Very good point, right? Yes. So that is the, we'll discuss this, right? So, but this is the philosophy. 1 coin gives you 1 vote. Okay? So this is greener, but now we have a philosophical question here, okay? Number 1, we get the problem here that large account holders get more votes, right? Because each Bitcoin gives you more votes. Is that fair? Is that okay? Like if somebody had said, let's switch the way we do elections in the country and say like, the more money you have, the more votes you get. Would people be happy with that? Maybe not, right? Not clear, it would be worse, but it would certainly.
Buying all the computation power.
Sorry?
They have more money and buying all computation power. It's not like the
that's not necessarily the case, but yes. I fully agree with you. It's not clear whether this is worse than what we did in the computational setting, the proof of work setting. Okay? It is or it is. It's different though. And the main takeaway here is that at least this anyone can join idea is not the same thing as saying no authentication. Okay, at least if we have a more, like we need to actually really specify what does anyone can join mean. Okay, and it's not clear whether in the Bitcoin setting, actually everybody can join because you really need to get a computer to do the mining, and today you actually need to have one of those like very fast ASICs to do it, because otherwise it's not really worthwhile. And it's the same thing here, like Hugo said, actually anyone can join. It's not anybody who can join. Anybody who can get a Bitcoin can join, okay? But we can have a more liberal definition of anyone can join, and the point is this equality with no authentication might not actually hold. Okay? But I agree, and Hugo's point is very well taken. It is actually kind of, this is actually a real difference, and it's not exactly the same type of free entry as Bitcoin. In order to join now, if you want to join, you need to buy. If you want to join Ethereum's proof of stake, you need to get an Ether. So you need to buy an Ether. If the other people that have Ethers now don't want to let you in, nobody wants to sell you an Ether, you cannot join. That is different with, than Bitcoin. So anyone can join is somewhat different. Not clear whether it's different in a real way, and it's not clear which one is more democratic. Because, as we mentioned, like actually buying one of those ASICs might not be so easy either, right? There's like the people that are producing them, maybe they don't want to sell it to you, right? You're gonna, yes, you can go in principle, go and build your own, but are you gonna, I can't do it. So it seems easier to go and buy an Ether, right? Yeah.
There's also a difference in like the sunk cost, right? Of like buying a mining rig and having to...
yes, that is an argument that's always been made. Let's not go into that thing. It's actually, that argument is very complicated, and like one can formalize in lots of different ways, and it's not clear actually what it leads to. Okay, so it's... Okay, so as you heard in Valeria's talk, there are actually two approaches. There are really two different, again, paradigms. Just as we have the two different paradigms of proof of work and proof of stake, which rely on different democratic ideas, or ideas of fairness and decentralization, even within proof of stake, there are two philosophies. Okay. And as you showed in Valeria's talk, I don't have that nice slide. If you look at the biggest blockchains out there, there were these very nice colors showing some are proof of work, some are approach 1, some are approach 2 in proof of stake. Okay, and it's pretty spread out. So what are the two philosophies? Philosophy number 1 is to say, look, Nakamoto was really great. If we want to be permissionless, we really should make sure that we have a protocol where we don't know how many people are there. Okay, we should allow what's today being called dynamic participation. In the original paper, what we define it, we call it sleepy consensus, but now the name dynamic participation has kind of taken over. So dynamic participation means people can come and go, and the protocol is not aware of how many people are showing up. Okay? So think of that as, when we have elections, everybody should go and vote, but they don't. What can you do, right? If you get 30% voting, that's fine, and you would like to make sure that if 50% of the people showing up are honest, we should be good. All right, so the setting of dynamic participation, we're saying, look, I don't know how many people are showing up, but as long as a majority of the people showing up are honest, in that case, we want to get consensus. So that's philosophy number 1. Okay. Philosophy, and the way we can achieve this is going to actually be taking Nakamoto consensus and kind of de-proof workifying it. So remove the proof of work from Nakamoto consensus and get something that actually still deals with dynamic participation, but without proof of work. And the second approach is instead the approach that was suggested by Mikali in the Algorand paper, showing like, look, let's just do selection of a subselection of a committee, and then run a kind of standard Byzantine fault tolerance or standard consensus protocol on that sub-selection. And the people I'm selecting are based on the amount of stake they have. Okay? This approach is awesome in the sense that it gives fast confirmation and it can work in a partially synchronous setting because we can now run partially synchronous protocols. Okay? This approach with dynamic participation, as I've shown you guys, the impossibility result I just gave you actually had nothing to do with proof of work setting or not. It just said if I don't know a factor 2 approximation, I cannot get partially synchronous. So here, if I want to handle dynamic participation, even just a factor 2, I need to be in a synchronous setting. So that's why there are two different philosophies. You have to decide, do you want to handle dynamic participation? If so, you have to be synchronous, okay? You have to be slower. Or you want to say, nah, I don't want to be slow, okay? I will require everybody to show up, and then I can run a partially synchronous protocol. So, all right, in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to like blow you through both of these two approaches on a high level, okay? So first of all, dynamic participation. So recall, we're in a setting now where we don't know, okay. We're removing this assumption from the permissionless setting, and we are allowing a PKI, but we're keeping those two assumptions, okay? So we're still keeping nodes don't know the exact number of nodes, and we allow late joining. So therefore, as I said, we need to be in a synchronous model, and we need to assume 1/2. Okay? And now we'll see that actually we can do something without proof of work by assuming that we have a PKI. Okay? Where does a PKI come from? It's just the stake. I assume that there is a cryptocurrency associated with the blockchain, and the public keys that are allowed, or think of it as saying each coin gives you one public key. Okay, and everybody knows now the public keys. You with me? So there is common knowledge about the set of public keys, and now we can use those. So can we kind of get this proof of work setting in this PKI model with dynamic participation? And the idea is actually very easy. The idea is the following. What did proof of work do, actually? Proof of work was a way, actually, to elect, really, the way you should think of Nakamoto's protocol, as I said, was like a voting scheme, right? Consensus is like voting. Nakamoto was implementing a very appealing, theoretically appealing voting scheme that's not been used in practice, as far as I know, but it's not bad as a voting scheme. It's something called random dictatorship, right? A random dictatorship is not much worse than like what we usually do, right? What we do now is we're letting the majority decide what happens, but that means there's a small subset of people that have some good ideas, but they're small. Their ideas will never win, right? So random dictatorship instead said, people, please vote. I'm going to pick a random one of you guys, and I'll let that person decide what happens. And in some sense, that's actually more fair. And it also has some very nice game theoretic properties. In any case, that's what Nakamoto does, right? He lets you do proof of work in order to select a random guy, and he's the dictator for each block. Okay? So that's how you should think of it. We use proof of work in order to elect a leader, and then that leader gets to decide what's in the next block. Okay? So how can we do the same thing without proof of work? The idea is very easy. Now we have a fixed set of public keys. Everybody who has a coin has a public key. Okay? And what I will do is to say, look, you cannot mine as much as you want. You get one try for the mining, and that's your public key. So the only puzzle solution you're allowed to try is your public key. So this is what we're going to do. Instead of doing this, I'm going to say, for each time step, so now we're going to protocol depends on time, each time step t, you get to try your public key as a puzzle solution. And if that gives a bunch of zeros, hooray, you're the leader. And if you're the leader, then you can propose a block and you sign it with your secret key. Okay, that's it. So let's just do Nakamoto, but instead of doing mining, at each time step, I get one try, and that's my public key. That's supposed to be my puzzle solution. If that indeed elects me, in that case, I get to propose a block, and nobody can steal this block from me because I need to sign it with my secret key. And in that case, you can forward it on. And there is two extra rules you need to enforce here, even though for this to not be broken. The first one is the blocks now need to contain the time steps. And I need to require the time steps to be strictly increasing, because otherwise clearly somebody can go back and be a leader from the past. And then second of all, I need to make sure that if somebody, I don't want to get a leader for tomorrow, right? I want these blocks to be the leaders are from now. So therefore I need to, if somebody sends me a block that has a leader from something too far in the future, much more than delta in the future, in that case I'm going to reject it. Yep.
What prevents you from checking if you are going to be the leader tomorrow?
So what this concludes now, and this requires a proof. It's similar to the proof of Nakamoto's consensus, but actually more complicated. What it shows that in a synchronous model, you can handle dynamic participation, okay, assuming what's called a static corruption model. Okay, so the attacker cannot dynamically corrupt people. Okay, and I think that leads to the question there. I can actually tell when I'm going to be the leader, and not only me, okay, everybody can tell who's going to be the next leader. And that's why this is not secure under adaptive corruptions. Because if I can corrupt people adaptively, I can tell who's going to be the leader, and I just corrupt those guys. So our original paper just had a static thing. So after we released that, there was the same time, very close to that, Algorand was released. And so Silvio Micali had this amazing idea to say, look, instead of having a hash function to decide eligibility, we can use something called a VRF, something called a verifiable random function. So think of a verifiable random function as a function that looks random, but only a person with a secret key can evaluate it. So only I can evaluate it. But once I evaluated it, anybody can check using my public key that the output is correct. Does that make sense? So it's like a hash function that I'm the only one who can evaluate it, but you can all check that it was correct. So now I know when I'm going to be the leader, but nobody else can do it. So if we then used Silva's beautiful trick here, we can also get something that handles adaptive corruption. Yep.
But if you know you're going to be the leader, no one else knows, but you can self-declare that you're going to be the leader, right?
Indeed. So this does not, in cryptography, we don't really consider bribing. The notion of adaptive corruption does not consider bribing, and so this is more considered like if I go to probe people, then I cannot. That's adaptive security. I agree with you that in today's world, it's not clear whether the adaptive security model is the right one, because bribing can happen. In that case, maybe they're very similar. Yeah.
You can also check other public keys and then move the coins to the one that's going to be leader.
I cannot check other public keys. What do you mean?
Like you can generate a bunch of keys and check the...
Oh, okay. That's going to be very small probability, yeah. That you can deal with. No. So the reason... Okay, that can be dealt with because the set of keys needs to be actually pre-committed to. You have to do some annoying stuff, okay? So that's what we did in the paper. You have to do some lookbacks. Let's not go into those annoyances. It's just horribilities, yeah?
Is there such a thing as the bribing model?
Kind of, yes, yeah. What?
Not as rational adversary.
The rational adversary doesn't deal with this. Also, and rationality here is defined with certain type of, you define explicit utility function, which is some very clear thing. Here it's something else, but yeah. All right, so to conclude here, what we've shown is we can get the dynamic participation. And let me just recall, what we've shown before is that dynamic participation means that we need it to be in a synchronous model, right? And so therefore, this now gives you something tight. And indeed, as we've seen, there's a lot of blockchains that have adopted kind of this approach, the longest chain approach, in order to get blockchains that handle dynamic participation. Now let's move on to the second philosophy, which is, I don't care about dynamic participation. I'm going to assume we have a known number of participants. That's it. Okay? And I think Silvio gives a very nice argument for why one should might want to prefer this model. Dynamic participation says, I don't know how many people show up, but I'm secure as long as 50% of the people showing up are there. Okay? So if we're now talk about incentives, just like we talk about voting, what happens? For me to go and vote doesn't really matter because there are lots of other people voting, so I might as well stay home because as long as 50% of the people show up are fine, it's going to be secure, right? So maybe I don't show up. Now, in this model, like Sylvia says, evil doesn't sleep. So the bad guys, they're going to always show up, right? The good guys are like, for me, I don't have to because there are other people there. So if I'm here in this model, I need to show up. Right? Security only holds if the good guys are showing up. So it's somewhat this bizarre non-monotonicity happens that something that seemingly looks like it as like a stronger model and therefore weaker security, actually, when you talk about incentives, actually might be stronger security. In any case, it's confusing, this thing, and there are two different models and two different philosophies. Yeah?
I mean, is that also the case for the other model? Like if the adversary corrupts 40% of all the participants, then you need that at least.
You need good guys to show up, yeah.
A large portion of the participants needs
to show up, yes, exactly.
Otherwise, he has the majority.
Yes, but in that case, yeah.
Like making this more explicit.
Exactly, but maybe that's what we need to do, right? Maybe we should do it explicitly because the bad guys are going to show up no matter what. And in that case, why not get partial synchrony? Because we can get a more efficient protocol. All right, let's go back. Remember, we have this axiom that in order to do something like this, we can't just run a BFT on the full set of participants. That would be a trivial solution. We would like to get something that has small communication complexity. And the idea that came with the Algorand paper was, let's do sub-selection. This is actually an idea that goes back to related work in the secure multi-party computation literature that says, if you want to get something with small communication complexity, let's sub-select a group of people and let those guys run the protocol. That's a very standard idea. However, that idea was previously only used to get static security. Right? So we know we sub-select, we know who they are, they run the protocol, but now the attacker can come and corrupt all of them. What Silver showed was actually using this VRF trick, we can make sure that only the committee members know who they are, and therefore this adaptive attack is not possible. That actually requires using an underlying BFT protocol that satisfies an additional property. That in the original paper was called player placeability. Today it has been replaced by a much cooler name of YOSO, you only speak once. So you want a protocol where people just speak once, because if I have a protocol where you speak many times, then even if you did this secret sub-selection after I've spoken, now you know I'm going to speak again, so therefore I can be corrupted. So that's why we need this additional property of the BFT protocol. Luckily, in fact, essentially all BFT protocols satisfy that property, so that we don't need to change much there. So in the remaining 2 minutes, I would like to give you an idea of how these BFT protocols work, okay? And that will be the last thing I tell you, and like the last kind of nugget of a consensus idea. So the way these BFT protocols work, and this goes back all the way to the 80s, is we're going to proceed in iterations, okay? And at least if we do this random sub-selection, it's very clear what happens in each iteration. In each iteration, we're going to select some leader. That's superhero Dan here. The leader is a function of the index here, okay? And this can be done either using a random oracle, or a hash function, or a VRF. So the iteration round determines the leader. Okay? It will also determine who the committee members are. Okay? But now for the underlying BFT protocol, just think of it as we pick a random leader and there's a fixed committee, but really the committee is changing over time, but we can really think of it as a modular approach, just focus on BFT with a fixed committee and random leaders every time. The leader in each round is going to propose a block, and then this block is going to have the following structure. It's going to contain the iteration number, It's going to contain a hash of the blockchain up until this point, and the new transactions. Okay, the original protocols didn't have this hash. This hash is, I'm studying in this way because it will generate two different approaches. But so sometimes this is empty, sometimes it's there. Okay, you send it out to the committee. The committee now is going to vote on this block. They're going to confirm the block. And the way they do it is when they see a block from a proposer, they will be signing it. And then they send it back to everybody else. Good guys are supposed to sign, okay. Good guys are supposed to sign only once. They will not sign multiple proposals. If the leader is proposing multiple things, they will only sign one of them. Okay. And the protocol will say that if this proposal has gotten signatures from 2/3 of the committee members, then the block has been notarized, we call it, or confirmed, let's say. So I send it out. If 2/3 of the committee agrees to it, we say this block has now been notarized. Okay, so honest guys are going to only vote once. A bad guy here, he can actually maybe vote for two different things. What I would like to argue here is that this protocol, this very simple protocol now, of picking leader, sending it to committee, having the committee sign. If you get 2/3 signature, then your block is confirmed. Actually, already has a very nice property. It's already consistent and it satisfies a relaxed form of liveness. And this is one of the classic arguments in distributed systems. It's called the quorum intersection argument. Let's consider two transactions that both got 2/3, that both were notarized. They got 2/3 vote. I'm going to claim that that's impossible. There cannot be two different transactions that were both confirmed. Okay? And therefore we have consistency. So if you have 2/3 votes, nobody else can think something else. Okay? Why is that? So assume we have 2/3 and honest. Right? So more than 2/3 are honest. That means there are less than 1/3 bad people. Okay? And assume for contradiction we have these two transactions, red and yellow, that both have 2/3 and votes. The bad guy, how many votes? He can vote for this and this, right? The good guys only vote for one. See, if I look at the votes here, the 2/3 N, if I remove the votes of the bad guy, how many votes do I have left? At least 1/3 N plus 1, right? Because the guy has less than 1/3 N. So here I must have 1/3 N plus 1 votes for the red. And here I must have 1/3 N plus 1 votes for blue from honest players, right? The key is always to look at the votes of honest players. We removed all the votes from bad guys. Okay, the bad guy can do at most 1/3 N votes here, 1/3 N some other. So in total we have 1/3 N plus 1 votes from good guys here, and 1/3 N plus 1 votes from good guys here. And that is 2/3 plus 2 votes from good guys. But that's a contradiction, because good guys only vote once, and there are only 2/3 N good guys. Okay? And that's the quorum intersection. So if we get this quorum, we get 2/3 N votes on something, we know it's going to be unique. So this very simple protocol has this great property that if Dan, the leader, is honest, we have consistency and liveness. If Dan is malicious, actually, it's going to be also consistent, so it's great, it just doesn't have liveness. So the only thing a bad leader can do is break liveness. So what do we do then? Well, here is where the literature, like all the protocols out there, follow this paradigm first, and then we need to do something. And this is something originally called view change. There are lots of different ways of dealing with it. The high-level idea is the following. I'm going to time out after some time. If the leader hasn't made a proposal that was notarized, I'm going to time out and says, he's a jerk, let's do something else. Okay? And now there are two different approaches. The timeout thing creates a complication because some people may think that we time out, and some people think that it was notarized. So it actually, we can't just time out and move on to the next leader. We need to complicate the story. And so Algorand and PBFT, what they do is that is like, I'm not going to just have one write-on confirmation, one signature, but I'm going to require to do this a certain number of times. So we have several rounds of confirmation. And after that, when it's confirmed, we can actually move on to the next run safely. Okay, so it's very elegant and clean. Another approach, which is more recent, that was popularized in hot stuff, but Itai told me the original idea came actually from Casper. It wasn't formalized there, but the idea was from there, is to say, like, actually, even when we're going to do these notorizations, we can actually still move on to the next leader straight away, and thereby pipeline things. But instead of directly, when something has this notarization, we can't really output it yet, but we're going to do something similar to Nakamoto, to say, like, look, I need to truncate the last few blocks. Okay? And that has kind of similar effect to doing these things, but I can still do pipelining. So I can still propose blocks at the right speed. It's just that at the end, I'm going to remove things. Now, these two models, again, are two different philosophies, actually, and they lead to different parameters. This one typically leads to slightly better finality, because here I typically need to remove a little bit more from the end, but this gets better pipelining. So again, it's a question of, it's not completely clear which is the better approach, and it depends on your application. That's it. So summing up, we've seen a few different versions of the permissionless model. The most permissionless model is the one where we make the least assumptions, and then we've seen that Nakamoto kind of satisfies, Nakamoto's protocol satisfies that, under the assumption that the majority of the computational power is held by good guys. So that's kind of what I call permissionless without any setup. But as we said, we can really define permissionless, and anyone can join us saying, maybe we can actually have some authentication there, in particular PKI, that's given by the stake. And in that setting, there are again two philosophies. The philosophy of saying, I would like to handle dynamic participation, or I would like to get a partially synchronous protocol. They're mutually exclusive, right? You cannot handle dynamic participation and partial synchrony. So you have to choose the philosophy you ascribe to. And that's it. Thank you.